Hi, my name is Shinko. Welcome to my channel. We have been escaping from the horrors of reality with The Warriors, Fire and Ice. This is the second book in the series. I have already read the first. You can check out my previous videos if you want. We are on chapter 12. Now, essentially, we left off that about Graystripe needing to be rescued from a river that he fell in on RiverClan territory, and the cat that rescued him was a she-cat named Silverstream. She's a RiverClan cat. And so they just got back home. Poor Graystripe is shivering and cold. He has thick fur. It's winter, and Tiger Claw has caught them now. If you're still with me here and you're confused about this story, I more than suggest you go and check it out. It is a wonderful story. If you like cats, you'll like it. It does have life and death. Characters do die, but more come, as the circle of life is. So if you're interested, go ahead, check it out. Fireheart lifted his head, about to speak, but Cinderpaw beat him to it. "It's my fault, Tiger Claw." She stared boldly up at the great tabby. "We were hunting on the frozen stream by the training hollow, on the bend by the deep pool. Even that bit was frozen. I slipped and Graystripe came to help me, but the ice wasn't thick enough for him, and it cracked. He fell in the water." Tiger Claw looked into her clear, bright eyes as she added, "It really is deep there. Fireheart had to pull him out." Fireheart cringed, remembering how he had stood motionless with terror at the sight of Graystripe disappearing into the river. Tiger Claw nodded and looked at Graystripe. "You'd better get yourself to Yellowfang before you freeze to death." The ThunderClan deputy stood up and stalked away, and Fireheart breathed a sigh of relief. Graystripe didn't hesitate. The long run home hadn't stopped his teeth from chattering. He bounded away to Yellowfang's den. Brackenpaw glanced at Cinderpaw and padded off to his nest, his tail drooping with exhaustion. Fireheart looked at Cinderpaw. "Aren't you even a bit frightened by Tiger Claw?" he asked curiously. "Why should I be?" replied Cinderpaw. "He's a great warrior. I admire him." Of course. Why shouldn't she? Fireheart thought. "You lie very well," he growled sternly, trying his best to act like a mentor. "Well, I try not to," meowed Cinderpaw. "I just thought the truth wouldn't be very helpful here." Fireheart had to admit she had a point. He shook his head slowly. "Go and get warm." "Yes, Fireheart." Cinderpaw dipped her head and charged after Brackenpaw. Fireheart padded over to the warrior's den. He was worried at how easily the story about Graystripe's soaking had tumbled from Cinderpaw's mouth. But he also believed she was a well-meaning and honest cat. He thought of Ravenpaw, another good cat. Had the story he told about Tiger Claw killing Redtail simply been just that? A story that tumbled from his mouth in the heat of the moment? Fireheart shook the thought away. Ravenpaw had been terrified when he spoke to Fireheart. He obviously believed his own story. Why else would he have been frightened enough to even leave the clan? Fireheart chose a few pieces of fresh kale and carried them over to the nettle clump. He settled himself beside it and began to gnaw thoughtfully on a mouse. The admiration in Cinderpaw's voice when she had spoken of Tiger Claw worried him. It seemed as though he alone suspected there was more to the ThunderClan deputy than met the eye. Bluestar's attitude towards Tiger Claw certainly hadn't changed. She had been treating him with the same trust and respect that she had always shown him. With a flash of frustration, Fireheart ripped another mouthful from his meal. A loud sneeze made him look up. Graystripe was heading towards him. "How are you?" Fireheart asked as Graystripe arrived, smelling of one of Yellowfang's herb concoctions. Graystripe sat down heavily and coughed. "I've saved you some food," Fireheart meowed, pushing a plump thrush and a vole towards his friend. "Yellowfang says I have to stay in the camp. She says I have a chill." Graystripe meowed thickly. "I'm not surprised. What did she dose you with?" "Feverfew and lavender." Graystripe lay down and began to nibble the thrush. "This will be enough for me," he mumbled. "I'm not very hungry." Fireheart looked at his friend in amazement. That wasn't something he had ever thought he'd hear Graystripe say. "You sure?" he asked. "There's plenty here." Graystripe stared down at the thrush and didn't reply. "Are you sure?" Fireheart repeated. "What?" Graystripe turned his faraway gaze on Fireheart. "Oh, yeah," he meowed. "He must have a fever," Fireheart decided, shaking his head. "Oh well, at least he was still here, thanks to that RiverClan cat." A few days later, Fireheart woke to find the first fog of Leaf Bear filling the den. When he crept outside, he could barely see the other side of the clearing. He heard paw steps hurrying towards him, and Mousefur appeared out of the gloom. "Tiger Claw wants to see you," she meowed. "Right, thanks," answered Fireheart. Alarm shot through him. He had slipped away to visit Princess yesterday. Had Tiger Claw noticed? "What was that?" Graystripe's voice wheezed behind him. He sat down beside Fireheart, sneezed, then yawned. "Tiger Claw wants to see me." Fireheart looked at his friend. "You should be asleep." He was beginning to worry about Graystripe. He ought to have recovered by now. It's been a few days. "Did you rest up yesterday?" he asked. "As much as I could between coughing and sneezing," complained Graystripe. "Then why weren't you in your nest when I got back from..." Fireheart hesitated, remembering he'd spent the afternoon talking with Princess. "Training." "Do you think I get any peace and quiet in there?" Graystripe flicked his head back at the den. "Warriors trooping all day? In and out? I found somewhere quieter, that's all." Fireheart was about to ask where, but Graystripe spoke first. "I wonder what Tiger Claw wants." Fireheart's paws prickled. "I better go find out." He could just see the shapes of Tiger Claw and Whitestorm through the mist, sitting below the high rock. As Fireheart padded over to them, they stopped talking, and Tiger Claw turned to him. "It's time. Cinderpaw and Bracketpaw were assessed," he growled. "Already?" Fireheart meowed in surprise. The apprentices had not been training long. "Bluestar wants to see how their training is progressing, especially with Graystripe being too ill to train Bracketpaw. If Bracketpaw is falling behind, she needs to know so she can appoint another mentor for him." Fireheart's tail twitched with annoyance. Surely Graystripe would recover soon. It would be unfair to entrust his first apprentice to someone else. "I've been taking Bracketpaw with me at Cinderpaw every day," he meowed quickly. Tiger Claw glanced at Whitestorm and nodded. "Yes, but this is your first time as a mentor. There's a lot for you to take on, and ThunderClan needs well-trained warriors from clan cats." "I know I'm just a kitty pet, not a clamber warrior," Fireheart thought bitterly. He looked down at his claws, stinging with resentment. No one had asked him to take on Bracketpaw, and he'd been putting in a lot of effort with both apprentices. Tiger Claw went on. "Send Bracketpaw and Cinderpaw on a hunting mission through Tall Pines as far as Two Leg Place. Keep an eye on them. Watch them hunt. Report to me. I'll be interested to see how much fresh kill they add to the pile." Whitestorm added, "If Cinderpaw's skills match her enthusiasm, there should be plenty to eat tonight. I hear she is a keen apprentice." Yes, she is, Fireheart agreed, though he was barely listening. Tiger Claw's words had sent his heart racing. Why was Tiger Claw sending him into Two Lake Place again? His own hunting assessment had been held over exactly the same route, and Tiger Claw had seen him sharing words with an old kitty pet friend. He reported it to Blue Star, and she had questioned Fireheart's loyalty to the clan. Fireheart felt the fur along his spine begin to prickle. Was this Tiger Claw's way of warning him that he had been spotted talking to Princess? Fireheart twisted his head and gave his back a quick lick, brushing his bristling hairs flat with his tongue. He sat up straight again and calmly suggested, "The Sunning Rocks would be equally good place to test their skills. The sun there might have burned away some of this mist, too." "No," growled Tiger Claw. "The Dawn Patrol reported scenting RiverClan at Sunning Rocks. They may have started hunting there again." Anger flared in his eyes, and his lip curled to reveal sharp teeth. "They will need to be warned off before we do any more training there. For now, Tall Pines will be much safer for the assessment." White Storm nodded in agreement while Fireheart's ears twitched uncomfortably at this news. RiverClan at Sunning Rocks! It was lucky they hadn't been spotted by enemy patrols when Graystripe fell into the river. As for the fog, Tiger Claw continued smoothly. "Hunting in difficult conditions will make the test more interesting." "Yes, Tiger Claw," meowed Fireheart, ducking his head respectfully to the two warriors. "I'll tell Cinderpaw and Brackapaw. We'll get started right away." When Fireheart explained the assessment to the apprentices, Cinderpaw flicked up her tail and ran in an excited circle. "An assessment! Do you think we're ready?" "Of course," Fireheart meowed, hiding his doubts. "You've been working hard and learning quickly." "But won't the fog make hunting difficult?" asked Brackenpaw. Fireheart replied, "There are advantages to the stillness of the air." Brackenpaw looked thoughtful, then his eyes began to shine, and he meowed, "It will be harder to sniff out prey, but it will also make it harder for the prey to smell us." "Exactly," Fireheart agreed. "Shall we go now?" Cinderpaw asked. "As soon as you'd like," answered Fireheart. "But take your time. It's not a race." His words were wasted on Cinderpaw, who was already charging towards the camp entrance. "You've got until sunset," he called after her. Brackenpaw glanced at Fireheart and turned to follow his sister with a small sigh. Fireheart tracked the two apprentices through the tall pines. The springy layer of pine needles under paw felt strangely soft after the frozen ground in the rest of the forest. He followed Cinderpaw's trail until he could see her stalking eagerly through the forest. Then he picked up Brackenpaw's scent and followed that. The trails crossed here and there. Fireheart could smell where the apprentices had run fast, where they had sat down, even where they had lingered together at one point. Before long, Fireheart found a spot where Cinderpaw had made a kill. She had taken it with her. As he followed her trail, he could smell the scent of her couch mingling with her own. Then he discovered where Brackenpaw had caught a thrush. The feathers were scattered everywhere. The apprentices were hunting well. Fireheart knew this for sure when he detected a scent thick with fresh kill. He dug down among the needles of the roots of a pine. There was a stash of prey hidden underneath it, left by Cinderpaw to pick up later. Fireheart felt a small glow of pride at her work. She had caught plenty, and now she was heading for the oak woods behind the Two Lake Place. Fireheart followed. Just beyond the edge of the pine forest, he picked up Brackenpaw's scent. It was strong, which meant the apprentice was nearby. Fireheart crept forward and peered around a young oak. The apprentice was crouching beneath the tangle of brambles, well disguised among its shadows. Fireheart could just see his tail moving as it twitched from side to side. Brackenpaw had his eyes fixed on a wood mouse that was scrambling around the roots of a tree. Brackenpaw was taking his time. Good, thought Fireheart. He watched Brackenpaw draw himself forward, one step at a time, the leaves beneath his paws hardly making a sound. He was as quiet as the mouse itself, which continued to hunt for food, suspecting nothing. Fireheart watched breathlessly, remembering his first hunting mission. Brackapaw closed in. The soft rustle of his paws on leaves melted into the background sounds of the forest. Fireheart found himself willing the apprentice on. Brackapaw was only a rabbit length away from the mouse now, his body pressed flat against the forest floor. The mouse scampering under a root and looked around. It froze. Something was wrong. Now, thought Fireheart. Brackenpaw sprang and landed on the mouse, grasping it with his front paws. The mouse didn't even have time to struggle. It was over in a single bite. Brackenpaw raised his head. Fireheart saw the satisfied expression on the young cat's face as he breathed the scent of his fresh kill. Then Brackenpaw darted away between the trees. Fireheart realized he was looking forward to reporting back to Tiger Claw about his apprentices. "Hi!" The small voice behind him made Fireheart jump into the air. He spun around. "How are we doing?" asked Cinderpaw, looking up at him with her head to the side. "You're not meant to ask that!" Fireheart spat and licked his ruffled fur. "You're not supposed to speak to me at all. I'm assessing you. Remember?" "Oh!" meowed Cinderpaw. "Sorry." Fireheart sighed. He would never have dared to approach Tiger Claw during his own assessment. He didn't want to scare Cinderpaw into obedience, as Tiger Claw had done with Ravenpaw, but he wouldn't mind a little respect every now and then. Sometimes he didn't feel like Cinderpaw's mentor at all. Cinderpaw looked at the ground for a moment, then glanced up at him, a puzzled expression in her face. "Were you really born over there? In Two-Leg Place?" The question caught Fireheart off guard. He glanced nervously in the direction of the two-leg fence, praying that the strange sense of Cinderpaw and Brackenpaw would keep Princess inside her own garden today. "Why'd you ask?" he mewed, stalling. "Tiger Claw mentioned it is all," answered Cinderpaw. She just seemed genuinely curious, but Fireheart felt a dark quiver of menace at the mention of Tiger Claw's name. What else had Tiger Claw been telling Cinderpaw about him? "I was born a kitty pet," Fireheart meowed firmly, "but I'm a warrior now. My life is with the clan. My old life wasn't bad, but it's over, and I'm glad." "Oh, okay," meowed Cinderpaw, sounding unconcerned. "See you later." She spun around and charged off into the trees. Fireheart stood alone in the woods, his heart thudding as he stared at the two-leg fence. A moon ago, his words to Cinderpaw about being glad his old life was over would have been utterly true. Now, he was not so sure. His fur tingled with the knowledge that some of his happiest moments recently had been spent sharing memories with his gentle kitty pet sister. On Chapter 13. As the sun sank into the forest, Fireheart waited beside the pine tree where Cinderpaw had buried her first lot of fresh kill. He heard past steps and turned to see Cinderpaw and Brackenpaw padding towards him. Prey dangled from their mouths. Brackenpaw could barely hold his couch. It was so big. Fireheart felt a surge of relief. Even Tiger Claw couldn't criticize the apprentice's efforts. "I'll help carry this lot back," Fireheart offered, flicking away the covering of pine needles from Cinderpaw's stash. He dug it up, grasped the fresh kill between his teeth, and set off back to the camp. When they arrived in the camp clearing, some of the clan cats were already taking their share of fresh kill from the pile. Tiger Claw must have been looking out for their return, because he padded over to them as they dropped their catch near the rest. "They caught all this themselves?" he asked, nudging the pile with a massive paw. "Oh, yes," Fireheart replied. "Good," meowed Tiger Claw. "Come and join me on Blue Star. Bring some fresh kill for yourself. We're already eating." Cinderpaw and Brackenpaw looked at Fireheart with admiring stares. It was a privilege to eat with the clan leader and deputy. Fireheart didn't share their excitement. He'd hoped that he would report to Blue Star alone. The last cat he wanted to share his meal with was Tiger Claw. "By the way, have you seen Graystripe?" asked Tiger Claw. Fireheart felt a pang of concern as Tiger Claw continued. He's supposed to stay in camp while he has this cold, but I haven't seen him since Sunhine. Fireheart shifted his paws. Had Graystripe gone off looking for peace and quiet again? No, he admitted. Perhaps he's with Yellowfang? Perhaps, echoed Tiger Claw, and padded away to where Bluestar was gnawing at a fat pigeon. Fireheart followed, trying to push away his growing worry about Graystripe's disappearances. He had selected a small chaffinch from the pile of brush kill as he passed, then wished he'd chosen a role. How is he going to give his report with a mouthful of feathers? Welcome, Fireheart, meowed Bluestar as Fireheart sat down in front of her. He placed the chaffinch on the ground, but decided not to start eating. Tiger Claw tells me your apprentice has caught plenty of prey. Bluestar's gaze was friendly. Tiger Claw, sitting up beside her, glared at him more critically, making Fireheart's tail twitch. Yes, they've never hunted in the mist before, but it didn't seem to put either of them off. Fireheart meowed. I watched Brackapaw catch a wood mouse. His stalking was excellent. And what about Cinderpaw? Asked Bluestar. Fireheart noticed a steely glint appear in her eyes. Was she worried about Cinderpaw's abilities? Fireheart replied, her hunting skills are developing well. She has a lot of enthusiasm. That's for sure. She doesn't seem to be scared of anything. Aren't you worried that might make her reckless? Asked Bluestar. She's quick and inquisitive, which makes her a good learner. I think that will make up for... Fireheart searched anxiously for the right word. Eagerness. Bluestar flicked her tail. Her eagerness, as you say, worries me. She meowed, flashing a glance at Tiger Claw. She will need careful guidance in her training. Fireheart's spirits plummeted. Was Bluestar unhappy with his mentoring? Bluestar's eyes softened. She was always going to be a challenge. But she is clearly turning into a fine hunter. You have done good work with her, Fireheart. With both of them, in fact. Fireheart brightened immediately, and Bluestar went on. I've noticed how you've taken over Brackenpaw's training without even being asked. And I want you to carry on mentoring them both for the time being. Tiger Claw turned his gaze away, but Fireheart didn't miss the anger that flashed in his eyes. Thank you, Bluestar, he meowed. I see your missing friend has returned, Tiger Claw growled without turning his head. Fireheart spun around to see Graystripe appearing from behind the nursery. It was probably just getting some peace and quiet, he suggested. He's still feverish, and it can't be easy being stuck in the camp all day. Easy or not, he should be concentrating on getting better, meowed Tiger Claw. Leaf Bearer's no time for sickness in the camp. Massfur is coughing on patrol this morning. I just hope StarClan protects us from green cough this season. We lost 5 kits to it last year. Bluestar nodded her gray head solemnly. Let's pray this leaf bear isn't as long or as hard. It's never an easy time for the clans. She looked wistful for a moment, then told Fireheart, Take that chaffinch and share it with Graystripe. He'll want to know how his apprentice did in the assessment. Yes, Bluestar, thanks, meowed Fireheart. He picked up the chaffinch and bounded over to the nettle clump where Graystripe had settled himself with a large wood mouse. Graystripe had eaten half of it by the time Fireheart arrived. Perhaps his cold is on the mend. As Fireheart dropped the chaffinch beside his friend, Graystripe sneezed. Cold no better? Asked Fireheart sympathetically. No, replied Graystripe with his mouth full. I guess I'll have to stay in the camp a little while longer. Fireheart thought his friend sounded a lot more cheerful than he had to before, but he didn't want to betray his growing suspicion that Graystripe was up to something. Brackapaw did really well in his assessment today, he meowed. Really? Graystripe took another bite of mouse. That's good. Yeah, he's a great hunter. Fireheart started to eat his chaffinch. Graystripe, he meowed after a long silence. Have you been out of the camp the past few days? Graystripe stopped chewing. Why do you ask? Fireheart's tail twitched uncomfortably. Well, you weren't here when I got in from last night's patrol, and Tiger Claw said he hadn't seen you since Sunhine today. Tiger Claw? Graystripe sounded worried. I told him you were probably out looking for peace and quiet, or that you might be with Yellowfang, Fireheart meowed. He took another bite of Chapfinch. Were you? He asked through the feathers, suddenly desperate for Graystripe to say yes, to stop the suspicion that Graystripe might be keeping a secret from him. But Graystripe ignored Fireheart's query. Well, thanks for covering for me. He carried on chewing. Fireheart didn't ask any more questions, even though he was burning with curiosity, and Graystripe got to his paws and announced he was going to the den. Fireheart was still no the wiser about what was on Graystripe's mind. Okay, he meowed. I think I'll stay here a bit longer. Graystripe gave him a brief nod and padded away. Fireheart rolled onto his back for a long stretch, scratching the ground above his head with his claws. He lay on his back for a while, thinking. From the smell of him, Graystripe had been giving himself a good wash very recently. Was he trying to hide some sense? Fireheart realized that Graystripe had pretty much admitted he had left the camp. But where could he have gone that he couldn't or wouldn't tell Fireheart? Suddenly his paws prickled. What about his own visits to Princess, and to Lake Territory of all places? He'd washed himself thoroughly before returning to camp too, and never mentioned the meetings to Graystripe. Fireheart flipped over and sat up. There was something caught under one of his claws. He lifted his paw and tugged out a piece of dirt with his teeth. It was a catkin, old and shriveled, but a catkin. What was this doing here? Willow trees didn't grow in ThunderClan's part of the forest. In fact, the only willows Fireheart had ever seen grow close to the river is in RiverClan territory. Fireheart held his breath as his heart began to pound. Had this come from Graystripe's coat? He crept into the warrior's den. Graystripe was already asleep. Fireheart lay awake beside him and wondered if Graystripe had really been foolish enough to return to RiverClan territory. The look in Leopardfur's eyes after Whiteclaw's death had shown that there was a score to be settled. Fireheart shuddered as he resolved to find out exactly where Graystripe was going and why. When Fireheart awoke, the den felt damp and chilled. One sniff of the air told him the rain was on its way. He pushed his way outside yawning. He hadn't slept while worrying about Graystripe. Even now, the thought of his friend alone in RiverClan territory sent a shiver through him. Chilly, eh? Running Wind's voice startled Fireheart. Fireheart looked over his shoulder, his tail twitching. The lean tabby warrior was padding out of the den. Yeah, Fireheart agreed. Are you okay? Asked Running Wind. Not caught your friend's cold, have you? Mousefur streaming with it this morning, and Longtail and Swiftpaw sneezed all through training yesterday. Fireheart shook his head. I'm fine. Just tired after yesterday's assessment. Ah, Blister thought you might be. That's why she asked me to help you with Cinderpaw and Brackapaw's training today. Is that okay with you? Yeah, thanks, Fireheart meowed. Right then, Running Wind decided. I'll meet you in the hollow after I've eaten. If Swiftpaw's coming down with a cold, we should have the place to ourselves. Are you hungry? Fireheart shook his head, and Running Wind trotted away to pick through the leftovers from last night's fresh kill. Fireheart went straight to the training hollow and waited for the others to arrive. His mind was not on training. He was still thinking about Graystripe. He felt sure his friend would slip out of the camp again today. A rain-laden wind was beginning to sway the leafless branches above the hollow when Cinderpaw and Brackapaw arrived, followed by Running Wind. What are we doing today? Asked Cinderpaw, scampering down into the hollow. Fireheart stared at her blankly. He hadn't thought about it at all. Hunting? Brackapaw meowed hopefully as he trotted after Cinderpaw. Running Wind padded across the hollow and joined them. How about practicing some stalking techniques? He suggested. Good idea, Fireheart agreed quickly. Not the old rabbit hears you mouse feels you lesson again, Cinderpaw moaned. Running Wind silenced her with a look and turned to Fireheart. Fireheart realized with a jump that Running Wind is waiting for him to start. I'll start by showing you the best way to stalk a rabbit, he stammered. He dropped into a crouch and began to move forward, fast and light, until he reached the end of the hollow. He stood and turned to find the other three cats staring at him quizzically. Are you sure that's a bull rabbit? meowed Cinderpaw, her whiskers twitching. Fireheart felt confused for a moment until he realized he just demonstrated his best bird stalking technique. A rabbit would have heard the swish of his fur through the undergrowth 3 fox lengths away. Fireheart looked at Runningwind, embarrassed. The tabby warrior frowned. How about I show you two how to creep up on a shrew? Cinderpaw turned her bright gaze from Fireheart to Runningwind. Fireheart sighed and padded over to watch. By sunhigh, Fireheart was still finding it difficult to concentrate on the training session. He kept imagining Graystripe sneaking out of the camp and longed to follow him. Eventually, his restlessness overwhelmed him. He went over to Runningwind and spoke quietly into his ear. I have a bellyache, he meowed. Can you take over the training for the rest of the day? I want to see if Yellowfang has anything for it. I thought you seemed a little distracted, Runningwind replied. You go back to camp. I'll take this pair out hunting. Thanks, Runningwind, meowed Fireheart, feeling a pang of shame that Runningwind had believed him so easily. He limped across the hollow, trying to look as if he were in pain. As soon as he was safely among the trees, he broke into a run and raced back to the camp. When Graystripe had returned yesterday, he appeared from behind the nursery. Fireheart knew from experience that this was the best place to slip through the camp boundary without being noticed. It was where Yellowfang had escaped from the camp when the clan had suspected the old medicine cat of Spotted Leaf's murder. Fireheart padded around the outside of the camp and sniffed at the wall of bracken. His heart sank as he picked up Graystripe's scent. Graystripe had definitely been sneaking out of the camp this way, and often by the smell of it. At least the scent was stale, which meant he hadn't been this way today. Fireheart crouched behind a nearby tree and settled down to wait. The wood was growing darker as rain clouds began to push across the sky. The shadows hid him perfectly, and he made sure he was downwind so Graystripe wouldn't detect him. His belly really was aching now, tense with guilt and apprehension. He half hoped Graystripe wouldn't come, half hoped he would just lead him to some quiet spot within ThunderClan's borders. Fireheart's heart lurched as he heard a rustling in the bracken wall. The gray nose was pushing its way through the fronds. Fireheart ducked his head as Graystripe looked around cautiously. After a few moments, the warrior leaped out and set off a trot towards the training hollow. Hope flared in Fireheart's chest. Perhaps Graystripe's cold was better, and he decided to join the training session. He set up after him, keeping a safe distance behind, relying on scent rather than sight to track his friend. But when the trail veered away from the path that led to the training hollow, Fireheart knew his hope had been in vain. With an ominous sense of dread, he saw the distinctive gray rock loom ahead through the trees, sunning rocks. Fireheart pricked his ears and opened his mouth, testing the breeze for the smell of enemy cats. At the edge of the trees, he caught a glimpse of a broad-shouldered gray cat slipping past the rocks towards the RiverClan border. There was no doubt now where Graystripe was heading. As soon as his friend was out of sight, Fireheart padded forward and peered down the slope to the river. By the swaying of the undergrowth, Fireheart could guess where Graystripe was. He just hoped there weren't any RiverClan warriors watching, too. Fireheart made his way down through the fronds. The river wasn't frozen anymore. He could hear the water lapping at the bank and splashing over the boulders. He slowed his pace as he reached the edge of the bracken and peered out at the open shore. Graystripe was sitting on the pebbles. The gray warrior was looking around, his ears pricked. But Fireheart could tell from the relaxed slope of his shoulders that he wasn't listening for prey. A strange cat's call sounded in the distance. A RiverClan patrol! Fireheart's fur prickled and his muscles distinctively tensed, but Graystripe didn't move. Then Fireheart heard a rustle in the bracken beyond the river. Still, Graystripe stayed where he was. Fireheart held his breath as a face appeared on the far river bank. With barely a sound, the silver she-cat emerged from the undergrowth and slipped into the river. Fireheart felt his heart miss a beat. Silverstream, the she-cat who rescued his friend. She swam easily across the river. Graystripe stood up and mewed with delight, kneading the pebbles with his paws in anticipation. Holding his tail high, he padded to the edge of the water as she climbed under the shore. Silverstream shook the drops from her fur, and the two gray cats touched noses gently. Graystripe rubbed his muzzle along her jaw, and she lifted her chin happily. Then Silverstream stood on tiptoe and wound her slender body around his. For once, Graystripe didn't seem to mind getting wet at all, because he purred loud enough for Fireheart to hear. as Silverstream pressed her damp fur against him. Fireheart's hackles bristled with horror. Chapter 14. How could Graystripe be so stupid? He was breaking every part of the warrior code by meeting this cat from another clan. Graystripe! Fireheart hissed as he sprang from the bushes. The two cats spun around to face him. Silverstream's ears flattened angrily. Graystripe just stared at him, startled. You followed me! Fireheart ignored his stunned mew. What are you doing? Don't you know how dangerous this is? Silverstream spoke up. It's okay. There won't be a patrol here until after sunset. You can't be sure of that, can you? As if you know all your clan's movements, Fireheart growled. Silverstream lifted her chin. Actually, I do. My father is Crooked Star, leader of River Clan. Fireheart froze. What are you playing at? He spat at Graystripe. Could you have chosen worse? Graystripe met Fireheart's eyes for an instant, then turned to Silverstream. I better go, he meowed. Silverstream blinked slowly, then stretched her head forward to touch his cheek. They closed their eyes and remained still for a moment. Fireheart watched, his paws prickling with alarm. Silverstream whispered something into Graystripe's ears, and the two cats stepped apart. The River Clan she-cat raised her head and stared challengingly into Fireheart's eyes before slipping back into the river. We just started chapter 14, but I'm going to end it there. It's a good spot to end it. So I guess we could kind of see this coming. We could kind of see this coming a mile away. So Graystripe and Silverstream, forbidden romance. Ooh. Well, okay. Is Fireheart in the right here, though? He's been visiting his sister, Princess, and now, well, that bond is a completely different bond. He doesn't see his sister romantically at all. That is still against the warrior code, and that is still a betrayal to the clan. And the act of him visiting Princess, Fireheart's been starting to doubt his loyalty, his own loyalty. And with River Clan and Thunder Clan being the state that they're in right now, what if a battle were to happen? How would Graystripe and Silverstream be able to fight in that battle if they're in that battle together? They wouldn't be able to do it, would they? If they truly loved each other, they wouldn't be able to. Or it could turn into a horrific situation of they have to fight and they do fight, and then maybe end their lives from it. You don't know. A lot could happen here. Let's see. We're about reaching halfway through. So, yes, a lot could happen. We still have not hit the actual climax of the story yet. We're going to be getting there soon, though. Something I've noticed, just a critique for the series. So, as I was reading, I myself got a little slightly confused because they could be quick. Something is happening and then all of a sudden the next paragraph, but there's really no space. There's no extra space between the paragraph to kind of indicate some time has passed. So I do have a critique for this that perhaps the layout, essentially the layout of the typing and the words, would help reiterate a time change or a mini time skip. I don't know, that's just something I noticed right now. And the reason I am reading these books isn't just read and show. It's to explore and learn and see, okay, well, how could this have been better if so? If you follow my videos, I add me talking like this Because the reality is, for fair use legality issues, well, I need to contribute something new. This is a wonderful series that I definitely suggest you pick up and read yourself. But I just find it very interesting that Aaron Hunter is an alias for 4 different authors that are working together. And I feel like that's a huge strength. You're able to push out a lot more books. You're able to get more of the story told. But my wondering is this. That's a big strength, but how could that be a weakness as well? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there. I literally got a warning on my phone about heat and certain medications that you might be taking that could affect dehydration and such. So yeah, it's hot out there apparently. Stay safe.